Today we're going to talk about noise, and not noise as in the loud neighbor who plays his guitar or his drums in the garage, but noise in your images that is introduced when you make large adjustments to your image, things that you do after the fact. So if you're in the field and you're taking this image, for example, here, and you expose for the shadow area, your camera is going to allow enough light in to give you the exposure you need, and it's going to have minimal noise. In a situation like this image here, where I was exposing more for this brighter area, I didn't want to blow any of this out. I was okay with this going black or going darker to make sure I could preserve this. W, and you can see all the blacks, and then the lights here are still preserved. We're okay. Now, obviously, if some situation, if I raise that up like this, and then if we go in deeper, you can see here that it's kind of mushy. Some people would say muddy. This is the noise. So by taking an image exposed thusly, sort of out of camera, this is the raw file, and then simply going in, if I go into my plugin here and just raise the shadows, you can see that it introduces this noise, and it just fundamentally makes the image look a bit hazy. Looks a little bit less sharp, a little less defined, and not clean and not as nice. So what you can do to some extent, this is one of those critical things, this does depend upon your camera, your sensor, and how it handles the dynamic range from the very darks to the very lights. Typically, bigger sensors handle this range better. And it's a variety of things having to do with pixels, actual physical size, and how much detail they have, and all the electronic wizardry that they put into them. So newer cameras tend to be better than older cameras. Bigger sensors tend to be better than smaller sensors. The question is the sensor and the camera that you're using good enough? Or can you use software to achieve the results that you want? If you have a medium format, say the Fuji that everybody's using now, the 50 and the 100 megapixel, giant sensor, lots of megapixels, you could probably get away with it in one shot, and this will show detail, and this will show detail, and you're good. Whereas with my camera, which is a Micro Four Thirds, this type of scenario tends to happen on a regular basis, but that's also because I like to shoot contrasty scenes. I'm not afraid of them. So anyway, I'm rambling. Let's get in and take a look. So if I go in here a little bit closer, and I raise the shadows a bit. Let me hit W so we can see. So the Corel is looking at this saying, this is so dark, there's very little detail. So that's why it's highlighted. When I hit W, it highlights those. If my whites were blown out, they would be highlighted as well. So I'm going to raise this up, and you can watch those colors change a bit. So now this area has been revealed to have some detail in it, at least again as Corel understands it. And then this area is sort of hit and miss. You can see the various colors in here, and it's kind of giving its best guess. So I'm going to hit W again, and you can see I'm revealed this here and here and here. And obviously, just as in case you think your eyes are deceiving you, I do not focus stack or any of that stuff. I tend to focus on what I want to be in focus, and I let this drift off. So my style, this stuff is slightly out of focus, not because of noise. It's out of focus because of the depth of field, the aperture I chose, and what I use for my focus point. So I wanted all of this area to be in focus, and I actually want this to be less in focus to kind of create a bit of natural depth. So my style. You'll hear people talking about focus stacking, where they'll take multiple images where this would be tack sharp also, and then they blend those two together. So if you're doing that, you won't see the same effect here. So we look into here. I'm going to go a little more extreme just for our example, like this. I would, typically I would never do that. The other thing I would probably never do, especially a scene like this, is I wouldn't just raise this globally. I would use an adjustment layer, throw it over the area that I want to lighten, and then do it just that area. But again, for our demo, this will work just fine. And so what you can do to try to help bring back some of the smoothness, if you will, of this, is to go to your noise or denoise wave. And so I'm gonna it's set at 0, so it's not doing anything, but the wavelet denoise here, I believe I want to say that it comes with it, but it might not. But I think it's a free download if you don't have it. You go to their plugins, get more, and you can download. There's a variety of free stuff, and there's some stuff you pay a few bucks for. So what you can do is play with these sliders here, and it's a combination of threshold, so at what point is it going to start to make the adjustment, and then how much detail do you want to try to retain from it. So let me give you an extreme example. Let me crank that over like that. And I mean, honestly, that right there should win Landscape Photographer of the Year, I would think. I mean, look at that thing, right? I mean, you'd vote for that. What you can do to sort of try to bring some detail back from this abomination, you know, it's kind of artsy, actually. Let me just save that. Just kidding. Is to use this to kind of try to bring it back. So I'm going to zoom back in so we can look here. So let's say I wasn't quite that insane, and I just went to, say, 27, 28, somewhere in that range. It's still probably too much. I tend to keep it around 12 to 15-ish range for what I do. And then you can use the detail slider to try to bring back some of the detail. But at some point, you're just kind of going in circles, right? You're going 2 steps forward, 1.5 steps back, that kind of thing. So double click, bring this back down. So what I'm going to do here this time is go up just until I see it start to give me the effect I want. Just a little bit, a little softness here, maybe too much. Let me bring this back down. I'm going to go to 13. So there's a little bit in there. If I go back to my wide view, you know, it isn't drawing my eye to it like, oh my goodness, it's mush. Okay, and then again, I can decide if I want to try to maintain some detail even while I'm doing that. And then I can try this one as well. So let me do this guy, same thing, kind of just a little bit, and then maybe just a touch of the detail here. And then I'll zoom back out. And so that allows me to have some of this revealed without it looking quite as hazy. And again, this was done globally, where I typically would recommend doing it via an adjustment layer. So let me actually, I'm going to bring this back down just so while we're here to show you that it works this way. So if I go here to my layers, hit adjust, and I'm gonna, you can see that it's the noise is back once I undo that. I'm just gonna go whack this over here, just to keeping it down and dirty and quick and easy. So I'm on the adjustment curve here, and so I can make those same adjustments, and you can see how it's getting a little bit adjusted. Let me tweak this guy too, like that. But it's doing nothing for the surrounding area. So just this area is having some of that removed, where the rest of it isn't. And so this is still, you know, is unaffected. The water's unaffected. And let me show you if you decide that, hey, that effect is pretty good. It's kind of what I want, but this water back here is, as I zoom way in, is kind of looking a little bit you know, less than ideal as well. It's a bit of haze. You know, it's obviously some of it's spray coming off, and then it's far away, and you know, all the things. So what you can do is you can either just add another object to the same adjustment layer, or you could do a separate one if you wanted a different amount. For the sake of this, I'm just going to keep it the same. So I'm going to add another curve to that same adjustment layer, and just again for the sake of getting this tutorial, and I'll do that. And so you can see the effect that that had there, and I'll do this so we can see it again. So that's on, that's with the denoise applied to the water, and then off. So look right in here. On, off, on, off. So you can again apply it to just specific areas, and then let me take it off completely so we can take a look at it here. It's subtle, right? It is subtle when it's full screen, you know, whatever. But if you're printing, or you're going to need to crop in, or something like that, it can be worth taking the time to do it. Especially again if you've got an image that you feel is looking a little bit hazy, or as I've heard it said, the blacks are kind of muddy, which I think is a pretty good you know, way to think about it. It's not muddy as in it's turning brown, but it's muddy as in it's just smushy, and it looks with those, you know, that noisy detail that's kind of taking away from the crispness. It just kind of looks hazy and bad. So this is the basic denoise solution here. Let me show you on another image. So this was essentially from the exposure area was a little bit dark, and I wanted to raise that so that I could have this revealed, and then it's introducing that noise. I can use the denoise to try to go between and get rid of some of that. Okay, so that's one reason you would use that. And again, my personal preference is typically to do it just to the areas that need it, as opposed to globally. However, there are some images where you kind of have to do the whole thing. Let's take a look. Okay, so here's an image that was shot, and it's a fairly low contrast image simply because there is quite a bit of actual haze and mist in the air. This was up in Olympic National Park, Klahani Ridge Trail for those who care. And looking down sort of the valley, you can see this is the road that leads down to the gate, miles below. And I love these layers, and this is one of my favorite kinds of things to photograph, and so I'm pretty familiar with how this tends to go. I like it when you've probably seen them where they're fairly good in blue, right? Fairly dark blue. And the way that can work is you can, make sure your exposure is up, and then you can come here and you essentially force contrast into a scene that doesn't have contrast. So I'm going to drag this down, which darkens some things, and then I'm going to do this as well. And now suddenly I've got, a blue rich effect, which is kind of neat. I mean, again, I like it. Some people, obviously want it to look more natural like it looked. But this is a way to get some detail. By forcing the contrast, you get detail into a scene that didn't have it. So if I undo that, you can see there was something there, but then you could see a little more better. Sorry. But if you zoom in, you can end up seeing a bit of that noise again. And if I go more extreme, this kind of thing. And so you might decide that you need to get rid of that. And so the same thing can be applied here, where you start to play with these guys. There we go. Just a touch. That's just done something. I'm at, what, 6.4? Zoom back out here. And I might say, well, these are trees. There's detail there. Here's a bit noise in between the tree lines here. And so I might decide to crank this up a little bit more. Let's do 9. It's looking fairly smooth, right? And so this is a scene where it wasn't that it was underexposed and I was trying to raise the exposure, creating the noise. This was a scene where it was generally very overexposed, and I was, or less contrasty, put it that way, where everything was kind of at the higher end, and then I forced contrast into the scene, and then noise can be introduced that way. And so by using your denoise, you can help smooth out some of that stuff. If, again, as everything with photography, being that it's your artistic decisions, what your vision is, this is just the tool to use to get rid of some of the unwanted, digitally enhanced or digitally introduced details. This isn't something you saw and you photographed. This is something the software is throwing into your image, or your sensor is introducing, or your computer software. There's so many factors in the digital process that can, depending on which one's, doing what, can introduce little flaws like that. And you may decide to use software like this to get rid of some of those imperfections. So, anyway, this was Denoise, getting rid of unwanted digital distractions. The key, like I said, is play with it, fart around with how much detail, what the threshold should be, color, luminance, see which one's giving you the effect you want. And then I always encourage people to work locally, so create an adjustment layer, play with it in just the area that needs it, and like all things, keep it subtle so that it doesn't look like you've smudged it with something. And have fun and make your images cleaner, a little better, a little nicer. Anyway, that's all I got. Talk to you later.